Hello, and you're very welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan. It is the 14th of September, 2023. The weather, bad weather, has returned with a vengeance. Thank goodness. Finally, we can sleep in our beds at night. Sarah, how was your week?
Good. Yes. That's I like autumn. It's my favorite. I don't mind the weather changing at all. I didn't find it that hot like everyone else, but I'm kind of a cold person at the best of times. But bit of rain, I love it.
Yeah, me too. Much prefer cooler weather than when it's too roasting. I mean, no one ever gives you the ideal weather, which is sort of 20 degrees with a light breeze and nice fluffy clouds in the sky. That just, for some reason, that's unobtainable in Ireland. I don't know why that is. Anyway, I want to start the show with a comment that we received last week, because people have been pointing out that we don't read comments enough, especially when they're critical. And we got a stinker last week. This guy, Sean McGabriel, he says, "Can I just say, Sarah, I wish you would both not talk about Dublin as though we all live there. We don't. I mean, yeah, I guess that's directed at you, right? Because I live in Tipperary and I certainly don't talk about Dublin like we all live there. But it is the capital city. Most of the population live there. And it's sort of newsworthy and has been newsworthy in recent months because of all the crime. But before you answer that, Sarah, I'm going to go on to point B, which is he wants us not always to be so completely safe and reasonable. Quote, "There's a resignation in your complacent and whimsical musings on the craziness of Ireland in 2023, which I find dispiriting. I'm not looking for irrational rants, but I do think there are many things which merit a bit more than bemusement and light-hearted world weariness." There you are, right? That's what you are.
Fair. I think these are both fair comments, and I think they're both more directed at me than you. Because you don't think you're not from Dublin or living in Dublin, so that's obviously me, but also bemusement and light-hearted world weariness should be the title of my autobiography for the last year at least in Ireland. So fair point, Sean. I will take that on the chin.
Well, I want to start this week because we look back on the week that really was. It's in the title of the podcast. Let's start with something that warrants a bit more than bemusement and world weariness, I think, which is I described Paul Murphy's actions earlier on this week as the lowest thing I had ever seen from a public representative. And that is Paul Murphy, TD, basically outed a school child because he disagreed with a piece written by the school child's mother, the journalist Barbara McCarthy. The background to this, I'm just giving this for listeners who might not be aware of the story, is that Barbara McCarthy had written a piece last week for, I believe, the Irish Mirror, that she writes for. She also, full disclosure, used to write for Gript. She doesn't anymore. Although if she ever wants to send us in a piece, we take it, but she doesn't as a full-time write for us anymore. She's with the Irish Mirror. She wrote a piece revealing basically that there's a teacher in a Dublin Educate Together school who the class have been instructed to use they, them pronouns for this teacher. You know, what age the kids are, we don't know, but the kids have been told to not refer to this teacher as a he or she, but as a they or a them. And then Paul Murphy basically purporting to out her source and say she was writing this based on information from her kid, publicly identified that her kid is in the school in question or claims the kid is there. I mean, that is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen from an Irish TD. Or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And I was watching it on Twitter, and it was obvious that really outraged and really thought this was like beyond the beyond. And it's deleted now, but it wasn't deleted for a couple of days. And I just think that the pearl clutching that would go on if this was, done in the reverse or about anybody who's on the right side of everything in Ireland these days, their child, surely to God at this, there's an agreement that kids and people's kids are just simply off the table or off limits. And, obviously, if you're not on the right side of this ideology, your kids are fair game. And that just shows the hypocrisy of people like Paul Murphy. Once again, like the lowest of the low, people's kids. But are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised. The tweet, well, obviously, you say it got huge negative backlash. It also got like 900 or something likes from people who thought this was acceptable behavior. And there's a sense out there. I mean, I've got a good friend. I know he sometimes listens to this podcast, and I won't name him because he obviously has a job, and I don't want to name people. But he made a point last week about this, where he said that all this hypocrisy when it comes to this and the be kind stuff. And I mean, we saw what happened with Roisin Murphy a couple of weeks ago. People preaching out be kind are also out there trying to lynch Roisin Murphy. He said the hypocrisy is the point. They know they're being hypocritical and they don't give a flying F about being hypocritical, because it's about showing you that they have the power to ignore their own rules.
And they're never held to account. Like there's accountability for Roisin Murphy. There's accountability for people who say the wrong thing. But if you're on the right side of this in their mind, you can say whatever you like and there's no accountability. Like, he's quietly deleted the tweet, fine. But like, that's it. If this was someone else who was saying something about, you know, the child of someone who was, you know, let's say a trans activist or something,
can you imagine the equivalent if it was, say, Ronan Mullen or Sharon Keoghan talking about a child of Kitty Holland? Kitty Holland, obviously a fairly well-known and liberal journalist with the Irish Times. And obviously that didn't happen and no one should ever do it. But imagine if that was the case. They would be in front of the Parliamentary Standards Committee. There would be, hypocrisy stories. One of the reasons we sound world weary, Sean, who sent in that comment, is because there's almost no point talking about them. Because you just get angry and angrier and angrier and angrier, and you're powerless to do anything about it. And that's the point. And that's what my friend who listens to us said, and I thought it was a really astute comment. I mean, they rub it in your face, and they do it consciously, and then they pretend they're the great and the good. I mean,
and also it's deflecting from the issue, like, you know, just a small issue as well, which I have an issue with also, which is that pupils aged 8 and 9 years of age, like my son is turning 7 in a couple of weeks, so a year from now, being told to use different pronouns for a teacher. No, like, what is this nonsense now? Why is this ideology about the teacher's preferred pronouns are now a class issue? No, I think that's absurd. And just, it's like, they're children. You know what I mean? Why does this have to come on to the agenda at all? That's the issue. And it's sort of like, there's something, it's almost like worse if you think about it, that a journalist has the balls to come out and write this story, and then somebody like Paul Murphy, who's an elected representative, summons all of the audacity in his body to tweet that tweet about her child being in the class. And there's no accountability to it, but it's also like, this is what you get when you dare to question the new world order around here. We will out your kid. So the next journalist who sits down and might have the neck to talk about, or might have the neck to talk about something like their child is being taught in school, or some absurd new thing that they're being expected to say or do as part of their education, they might think twice because their children might get out it too. It's not just the issue of, you know, that he's not being held to account, but it's the fact that it's more of this kind of bullying people into, you better agree with us, and even if you don't agree with us, by God, you better stay silent about it, because if you don't, you will either lose your job, or if we can't do that, we will come for your kid on Twitter, or we'll do, you know, or we'll all, you know, the swarm will just annihilate you online. We know of people who've had their jobs approached, who've had different things done to them. We'll put your address online. We'll do this. We'll do that. This is the kind of standard behavior now, and that's the scariest thing of all. This is a journalist, a legitimate journalist, writing an article, and her child is being exposed because she's had the audacity to do it. Like, that's really, you know, that's something I'm not whimsically kind of, you know, just accepting about. That's something that makes me extremely angry and extremely concerned. And you know what? It's once again one of those things, John, that I guarantee you in 10 or 15 years' time, you'll be sitting around with people at dinner parties and they'll all say, oh no, I didn't agree with any of that at the time. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Don't get me started on them whoers. They're worse. The people who are worse here are not. Like, I expect that kind of scumbaggery from Murphy and his ilk, but they're not actually the real villains, because we're talking about this. Now, I am not a customary listener to the Irish Times Politics podcast, but I can guarantee you this wasn't referenced on it. I can guarantee it wasn't on the Indo Daily. I know because I looked for coverage that there was basically no coverage in any newspaper. Like there are there's what you might call the dirtbag left, Paul Murphy and his gang. But then there's the respectable people, the political correspondents, the great and the good, the people who will be out in an instant to condemn the aforementioned Ronan Mullen or Sharon Keoghan and say how terrible and shocking it was, and how Irish discourse has really taken a turn for the worse, and how this kind of extremism in politics is just completely unwelcome and terrible, shocking stuff if it's the right person. But when it is the dirtbag left, they shut up because they know what side their bread is buttered on, and they're quite content to have the brown shirts, for want of a better term, out there beating people up so long as they're not personally associated with it. And that is absolutely, and I would call them out. I mean, all of them, the Virgin Media political correspondents, three people who I have a lot of time for personally. They do their podcast every week. They talk politely about the issues of the nation. This doesn't merit their attention. Oh no, we turn a blind eye to that. I mean, insert any political correspondent covering the Dáil, and you get the same reaction. The blind eye is turned when the unpleasantness is in the greater good, and that's basically the attitude to this stuff. And you'll see
that's
the same.
Not journalism. Like that's not journalism. Like we have the that's just something else entirely, because that's not your job as a political correspondent. Your job as a political correspondent is to call it out, whether you like it or not. Not to only call it out when it suits you and suits your agenda and suits what you think is the greater good. And that's why that's why there's only certain people that are, in my opinion, legitimately deserving of the word journalist. If you're sitting around going, oh yeah, Micheal, come and sign my book and let's go to this and let's go to that, we're all pals, and you don't call out anything, but you call it out if it's someone that you and your gang of mates don't like, that's not a journalist.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that about. I mean, you'll see it again this weekend, right? Because the Kelly Jane Keane, aka Posey Parker, is holding an event in Dublin. She is somebody who she's a UK activist. She's a global activist, really, on the whole issue of the gender debate. She's holding this protest. Various luminaries in the country, like Alva Smith, who was recently awarded the Freedom of Dublin, have been organising a counter protest, go along and protest that event. Now, there's a neat trick. There's a neat trick. I don't know, and I hope we should all hope that there isn't any violence. But watch the neat trick that will happen if there is, because the left have an answer to violence that breaks out at protests either way. If the violence starts and the left emerges supreme, then it's a triumphant day in which the fascists have been driven off the streets. And if the violence starts and the left does not emerge triumphant and comes off second best, then it is evidence of the violence and terrorism of the far right beating innocent people off the streets and attacking women and minorities. And you can't win. So they have a complete free pass. And I'm not suggesting that Alva Smith in any way was encouraging there to be any aggro this weekend. But if there is aggro at that event, independently of her or anyone else who called for it to be organised, then there would be a complete free pass given, because you can't lose. And the narrative is set before the event even happens. It is set up in such a way that you basically get a free pass to do what you want. And you see that with going back to COVID, where there was where we were all supposed to be indoors unless you were in the approved gang and wanted to have a protest about a police shooting in America. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
Forgot about that. Do you not find that there's loads of things that happen during that period where you forget about?
You do.
I don't know what the phenomenon of it is. Like it's not like a trauma thing, but like there was just a lot, and then sometimes I will suddenly remember something quite mental that I was that I was forced to do in some way.
Tony Holohan personally policing Dame Street. That was a good one. Do you remember that?
Yeah, or something like I remember I was laughing talking to somebody the other day because during the first lockdown, I think it was, anyway, my, at the time, 3-year-old, I was cleaning up, and my, at the time, 3-year-old sprayed my 1-year-old in the face with Flash lemon counter spray or whatever. Anyway, he had to
He
go
was
into
just
Temple
trying
Street.
to clean the child.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And the poor little guy had to go into Temple Street and get his eyes rinsed out because it caused a kind of an abrasion on his eye. Anyway, so I drove like down the Malahide Road, but it's a long story, but we didn't realize what had happened until a few hours later. And so it was kind of bedtime by the time I rang my sister, and she was like, you have to bring him in. Because I said, oh, there's a small chance that he got sprayed in the face because I'd smelt it, and the 3.5-year-old or whatever he was cute enough to have put it away. And I just smelt it in the air and noticed that the top of Connor's head was a bit wet. And I thought, that's weird. And then later I remembered and said to her, well, there's a small chance he would have been sprayed in the face because he was crying and his eyes were red. And she said, oh, you have to bring him in. Anyway, I drove down the Malahide Road at about, I'd say it was probably at this rate, 8:30 at night or 9 o'clock. It was dark. And I had a car on the road, like nobody, nothing, like full like lockdown or whatever. And then I got into like kind of Mountjoy Square. And you know the way there's like a block of flats just coming on to Mountjoy Square, whatever. And it was kicking, John. Like it was kicking. They were having a full-on party, like a full-on party. People out on the road, like full-on party. And I remember being like, God, that's pretty wild now. And
You
on
could
the
have got
way
some
back,
traction. You could have
I
got some
know.
traction at the time if you'd videoed that and put it on Twitter at the time. Can you
I
imagine
know,
all
yeah.
that? Yeah, that would have been
I know. I don't
10
live for
10,000
likes, luckily.
Yeah, 10,000
But
likes easily.
but I was stopped on the way back, asked where I was going. By now it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning. I have a child in the back. And I was like, I'm just coming from Temple Street. And he was like, yeah, grand, whatever. But like I was stopped on the way home. But I'd driven past this party earlier. And I felt like saying to the guard, like, here, do you want to head back in there to I just and have a look at what, like, me and my 1-year-old are not the problem. But anyway, I just sometimes like things will just random little nuggets of kind of madness will just pop back into your head. And I don't know, it's like a year of your life that you lost and you forget half of it. But it was mad.
My favorite thing about the George Floyd protests during lockdown was the medical experts who came out, presumably feeling that they absolutely had to defend this some way because, you have to stick up for your tribe. I think it was in the US, the medical experts who came out and said that actually, although lockdown was broadly good for people, protesting injustice was actually good for mental health, and there should be an exception made for it. I mean, you just have to laugh. I mean, the extent to which, and I don't think it's been fully appreciated yet, the extent to which the expert class, in inverted commas, pissed away their credibility during COVID has yet to be fully appreciated. And it's not just, I mean, you see it in things like the TV license. You see it in things like the public's continued stubborn resistance on the climate change stuff. People aren't buying it anymore. I mean, maybe it's a minority still who aren't buying it, but it's a lot larger than it was before COVID.
Well, I think that that's also a symptom of what we're talking about, which is lack of journalists who really call people out, means that the whole thing becomes this bubble, and they're not exposed enough to the growing number of people who just aren't eating or buying what they're selling in general. And that actually is a nice segue onto one of the things I wanted to talk about today, which was Micheal Martin coming out and saying that Sinn Féin were infecting young people. Was that the word?
He did. There's a new pandemic in the country, and folks, if you're listening at home, symptoms of this pandemic are if you see young people humming like the fields of Athenry, you'll put on your face mask because they may well be infected.
Like, I often think about two people, much like yourself. I'm not going to name, but people that I grew up with. And that I, love very dearly. The people you grow up with as a kid, they always have a kind of a special place in your life, I think, forever. And these are people who, as they grew up and became of voting age, would have voted for my dad because of, kind of a almost familial loyalty or whatever. But apart from that, to this day, and now they'd be in their like 30s are hardcore Sinn Féin voters, and like as far as I know, like sometimes even maybe canvass for Sinn Féin. And these people are people who I very much rate, very much think are clever. Just because I don't agree with them, fine, whatever. But like, I was even insulted on their behalf that they would be that Micheal would talk like that about young people being infected. Like when without any, it's just so patronizing and like really missing the point of why people vote, and also missing the point of why young people might be pissed off at what you're selling. Do you know what I mean? And it's just that there's an element of like I'm not a Sinn Féin voter. I don't think that comes as any kind of, shock to anyone. But I have to say, when I read it, I felt offended on their behalf. I felt like he, was talking about these people as if they're idiots or kind of less or something. And I didn't like it. And I shouldn't care less, but I do.
A couple of weeks ago on this podcast, you had a massive row with William Campbell when he, over the Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables comment. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. I mean, and if William were here, he might say, well, it was taken out of context. Either of them. I don't know. I mean, but it's the same thing. You're basically telling people that they're stupid. That
it wasn't taken out of context, but
no, I'm saying that I'm saying that's what I don't believe.
I know.
Get over it, Sarah. But the issue here is you're telling young people that they're dumb. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, you've been infected. It means you haven't done any thinking. You've just been sort of like infected with the virus. And like, we can cure you if we just make you watch like old videos of Sean Lemass on the loop. I mean, it's bizarro stuff that he would use that kind of language. And you look at the country. I mean, I actually like know people who are voting for Sinn Féin, and I like you would never be a Sinn Féin voter. And I asked one of them, a very intelligent fellow, recently why he was doing it, and his summation summed it up for me more than anything else. He said everything is broken. He said, schools are broken. Education is an absolute mess, which it is. We can do a full podcast on the state of what's going on in Irish schools at the moment with the junior cert curriculum and the lack of teachers and the disciplinary issues across the board. He said the health service is a catastrophe. That the immigration system is a catastrophe. The housing system is a catastrophe. The government is focused on all this shite. That was his word. Everything is broken. I'm voting against it. As simple as that. And this guy isn't even particularly. I know this guy doesn't give a hoot about the United Ireland issue. Vote for Sinn Féin anyway.
Well, I mean, the thing is, right, that I think that I don't think that everything is broken, but I think that the fact that narrative, like that he thinks that, is a failure in and of itself. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't think everything is broken either, but I think he was onto something. I mean, and he wasn't talking, I don't think, purely about like the institutions of the state. I'm giving the examples.
Yeah.
I think he was talking more about sort of like, there's a sense that like the whole political system, like we used the phrase a couple of weeks ago, there's neither head nor tail on it. I think that's what he was getting at. Like there's all the priorities seem out of whack. I think that was more what he was getting at. And I may be trying, you know who you are. Text me if I got that wrong. But that's the sense.
No, but I mean, what I'm saying is that, like, even if, like, the fact that he thinks that is a failure of its own, if you know what I mean. Like, the like, I don't think we live in like this terrible country that's, the shithole that people like Paul Murphy make it out to be. I think there are big problems. You're absolutely right, but I don't think that there's this like huge like catastrophe of a country. I think that, I think there are some things that work, reasonably well. I think that there's some things that we're doing okay. And if you look at certain, what's the word, like, leaderboards or whatever of certain things, we do okay internationally. So I don't think everything is broken, but I think that there is a and I don't mean to use such a dramatic word, but I think that especially amongst young people, there is a kind of a despair and a narrative that is set in that, like, I'll never buy a house, I'll never do this, I'll never do that, I'll never do that. And that's a failure of itself, if you know what I mean. That's like there's a, the only thing to do is leave, and this, that, and the other. That's not entirely true, but I get why people feel that way. And I think that the government are failing to by allowing that to become so embedded and unchallenged. Do you know what I mean? And I'd be the first to talk about health, and the first to talk about problems in education, the first to talk about, different things that the government are doing wrong. But I still don't think it's that bad.
Yeah, but I mean, I do get it. I get what he was saying. I take all the points on board that you're making there, because I think they're obviously, the roads are decent, right? I live in a small village in Tipperary where there isn't that much crime, where everything is broadly fine. You can buy your food. You're not going hungry. But I have the privilege of living in my own house, so I mean, I'm privileged as well. But what more annoys me, and the reason why I'm tempted to give them the two fingers at the ballot box, won't be Sinn Féin. I'll find some other appropriate two fingers to give them. Is a sense that there's a political class in the country that blames the public for everything. That, no matter what the problem is, the solution is more restrictions on the public. You're eating too much food. You're drinking too many beers. We need to nanny you with an alcohol pricing plan. We need to reduce.
You're driving too fast.
You're driving too fast. We need to change the speed limits. You're killing the world by heating your home, so more fuel taxes.
You're hurting people's feelings with your words, so we'll make that illegal too.
We'll make that illegal too. Like, over and over again, there's this sense like there is nothing that the Irish establishment see as a problem in this country more than the lives of the Irish people who they're supposed to be governing. Like, everything we do is wrong to these people. You're not paying your TV license. Oh well, we revamp that. We bring in some new kind of scheme. It is just like the sense that they despise you is pervasive. That's
is it
the thing.
Do they despise you, or do they just has the relationship, like between the public and the political class broken down such that it's kind of contempt, like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I met my husband when I was 30, so I was single for my 20s, and there was this famous book called He's Just Not That Into You. And like, I just think the definite vibe I get from the government is that he's just not really that into us, all of us, Yeah. It's like, we don't really, you're like, do you know what it was? It was perfectly demonstrated when Roger O'Gorman rolled his eyes when Ben asked him a question. It's that, it's not just about Gript. It's about, like, oh God, the public, I'm going to be questioned on this by stupid people who don't understand that I'm morally superior to them and I'm doing the greater good. And your questions are just inconvenient and annoying. And why don't you just shut up and let us do the right thing all the time like we want to?
And it was a very fair question. I mean, the government.
What was the question again?
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, the eye roll sort of got the attention, but the question was, I'm 90% sure this was the question. But I know what the topic was, but I don't know what the exact wording of the question was. But basically, it was to do with the application of puberty blockers to kids. There's no scientific study saying this is a good idea. And he said, "Have you got any?" And Roderick O'Gorman doesn't. Well, he's doing it anyway because the trans activists want him to do it. And I think it's very important. And this is the same thing with speed limits. If you're going to enact policy, there should be evidence for it. The only evidence they have on the speed limits thing is that it'll reduce emissions. So they're pretending, and they are overtly pretending, that it's about saving lives, when it has nothing to do with that. And I mean, their own figures hype the emissions benefits of it. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
On both counts. Anyway, since we're a bit ranty this week, and we're all blaming Sean for being a bit ranty this week, no world weariness on the show. I will be world weary about one thing though, which is that we're in the wrong job, both of us. I mean, we should be photographers.
Oh God.
Yeah, because there's somebody who's going to get a job now with RTE, the national broadcaster, for a 3-year contract. for which they will be paid a sum total of €240,000. This is all revealed, by the way, by Keenan Brennan in the Examiner, so credit where credit's due. We had a go with journalists earlier on, but in fairness to Keenan, this is a cracking story. 240,000 over 3 years, 80 grand a year, to take 16 still photographs every week from the set of Fair City for promotional purposes. So you might have thought when that came out there'd be a massive sort of rebellion, and indeed RTE were before the Oireachtas Committee this week, and Kevin Backer said he didn't understand how that happened. But then the executive producer of Fair City, Brigida Corsi, she put out a statement saying, "I cannot overstate the importance of high quality, highly curated photography in promoting Fair City in the busy landscape of press and digital publicity. It is," wait for this now, "vital to have a skilled photographer to capture in single frames moments of drama that will intrigue our regular audience, and this is the funniest bit, bring new viewers to Fair City." So some village in Mayo is going to spend all of its 500 TV licenses paying a guy to take 16 still photographs every week on the set of Fair City. I mean, what a job.
I, for €50, will come in and show them how to do a screenshot of, just play Fair City on your laptop and then screenshot a scene, and there you go.
That might not be
Like,
high quality or highly curated photography.
Oh, stop, will you? Like, stop. Like, just stop.
I mean, maybe 16, in fairness,
and also, why is it 16? But like, that doesn't like. Are we being trolled?
Well, I don't know. I don't think the money is for the photography. I think you're getting paid 80 grand a year because you got to spend every week of the year watching Fair City live. I mean, and the contract is for 3 years because at the end of that, you're going to be in an asylum. But whatever it is, I mean, are these people on the moon? I mean, this has been issued, by the way, after the RTE scandal, at a time when they're begging the public for money because they're going to go broke and they might have to sell Montrose, and isn't it terrible? And this is what they're spending money on. I mean, people have this idea that RTE can be reformed. It cannot be reformed because this stuff is in the DNA of institutions and organizations. It's in the DNA, and you can't get it out. It's like,
again, it comes down to the point of like, someone signed off on that going out as a job spec. The lack of self-awareness that went out. The people sat around and went, "Yeah, no, we need that. That's a good idea." Like, that sounds like something important. There's absolutely no way on earth that that's important. None.
I mean, it just like to broaden it out a bit. Like, it just sums up RTE for me. I mean, I was saying to my wife earlier on this evening, talking about this issue, that she's massive into her Scandi noir dramas. I absolutely hate them. You know the ones I'm talking about. Like, they're all in like some Scandinavian language, Swedish or Danish or something. They're subtitled.
Oh my God, John! Honestly, this is so funny. I hate those kind of things, and Keith really likes them. This is weird. I hate subtitles because, frankly, I just want to be doing other things at the same time.
You come down to me for an hour of telly every night, and I'll send her up to your house. But in any case, they're all the same. They're all like, it's all like, some like, it's always like an alcoholic divorced cop finds a grisly ritual sacrifice murder of a child in the woods
while he's wearing an Aran sweater.
Yeah, those ones. But whether you like them or not, they're massively popular, and they have been produced in countries where English isn't the first language, largely by their national broadcasters, and they have become internationally successful to the extent that Scandi noir is it's a genre of drama that is kind of internationally recognized. And in Ireland, we pour all this money into the Orts community and all of it into RTE. And what do they produce? I mean, I can't think in my lifetime of an Irish drama series produced here that has gone to get massive international recognition. You could maybe make a case for the one a couple of years ago about the gangsters in Dublin. I can't remember what it was called.
Love Hate.
Love Hate. But that's about the only one.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Well, maybe the other one. Maybe
celebrity toy show on ice or something.
I was going to say, maybe the other one is that one where the book about the two kids in Trinity, and there was a bit of sex in it, and like everyone thought the guy was really hot or something.
Oh, Normal People. I never watched it.
Yeah, me neither.
Keith did, though, and he said it was very good. Paul Mescal, isn't that it?
Yes, that's it. So I mean that's it. Those are two. But I don't want to say I don't know normal people was an RTE production. Like it's astonishing to me how little though we produce for all that money, and they're spending 80 grand on a photographer for Fair City, where like no kidding, I because of the far right Fergal story they've been doing a couple of weeks, I've had to watch for a couple of weeks. I had to watch a few scenes, and I genuinely think you or me could act as well as some of those people. That's not being harsh. I genuinely think we could.
Oh God, I've never watched it, so I don't know. But I wasn't it? Isn't it the? Wasn't it this? Was it the stuff of urban legend, or was it actually true that Father Ted was turned down by RT and went to Channel 4?
That was true.
Or
No, that's not
so
urban
that
legend. That's true. That's not.
that was internationally kind of considered, but we passed on it.
Yep, we did. It was made by Channel 4. And if you look at most of our most successful sort of TV stars, you know, very few of them got their start on Irish TV. Gabriel Byrne, I think, was on the precursor of Glen Rowe in the 1970s. But like most of our major international stars of TV and radio, they went overseas. Graham Norton, Terry Wogan, BBC, the girl who presents Love Island, whatever her name is, Laura something or other. I mean, these people, Whitmore, they go overseas. We don't tend to produce the kind of content that gets international attention in comparison to the way the Scandinavians do. Or even
but I would say
Germans.
but back to the main point, which is that they've just been embroiled in a scandal about spending money on nonsense, basically.
Mhm.
And the fact that they have the neck to, for this, and to have a straight face, frankly, while they say that this is worth 80 grand a year. I mean, there are people, I'm sure, who listen to this podcast, but there are people I know, who work very, very hard for half or less than that wage. And I'm sure when they see that, and they're, potentially waiting for a court summons for not paying their TV license, they must think to themselves, well, am I an absolute gobshite here, or what is going on?
Mhm.
Because for RTE to pay somebody 80 grand to take 16 photos, and for people who are on 35 to 40 grand a year to be expected to pay what is the TV license? I can't even remember. 120.
I think it's like 165 euros.
Right, to pay 165 euro for the privilege is obscene, and no wonder people are angry. And I think that that simmering resentment has not gone away just because people have had the summer, to hopefully in their minds forget about it. And we talked about this RTE thing at the time and said that what would happen is that it'd be business as usual within a couple of months, and everyone go, oh, lessons have been learned, and they got rid of Ryan Tubridy, so something happened, and lessons have been learned. No lessons have been learned. This is the exact physical manifestation of the fact that nothing has been learned.
Yeah, and it proves the importance of not paying your TV license for those who aren't doing it. Because if people were still paying their TV license in the same numbers that they were in beforehand, before the Ryan Tubridy thing, RTE wouldn't be in a financial hole. And this story proves it would be business as usual. And instead they're having to trail into the Oireachtas committee and beg for money and talk about selling Montrose, which of course they won't do. And the funny thing about that is I'm almost convinced the talk about selling Montrose is all a little bit of a sympathy play. Oh no, this is how desperate the situation is. You need to bail us out. And I think a lot of people are listening at home going, yeah, go on, sell it. If for no other reason than it might be turned into refugee accommodation in Donnybrook, which would be amusing.
Why does your mind go to that?
I just think I know how welcoming. I know how welcoming the people are of South Dublin are. I'm sure they'd welcome the change.
Yeah. Okay, John. Anyway, I think no lessons have been learned, and is it me, or are we kind of slower in coming out of silly season this year than other years? Do you feel that? It's midway through September, and it's still no kind of.
I don't know. I was enthralled. I mean, just this morning, I was enthralled by Virgin Media's report, Vital News report about meteor.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, no. I'll tell you. I actually, Can I just say, if anyone is laughing at Virgin Media for that story, I understand. Very, very funny if what appears to have happened did in fact happen and they were fooled by two lads digging a hole with the shovel. It's very, very funny. But I get it because I also am the editor of a news outlet, and I can tell you, Sarah, the last month and a half has been hell trying to find
Yeah,
things to write about every day.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah,
there are people who want us to write about the same topics every day and they read them every day, and that's fair enough. But like, you can't. You got to
yeah,
find new things to. There's got to be news, and it's been very slim picking.
yeah. So I don't know, like maybe there's a hope, like that the RTE thing, is just going to kind of drift away or whatever. But I don't think that those. I think that um, the people who have committed or decided they're not paying the TV license have committed to that. I don't think they're just going to
It's going to
slowly.
get worse. It's going to get continuously worse because bear in mind what's happened is the TV license falls for renewal every like if you basically divide the population into groups of 12, into 12 groups I should say rather than groups of 12. There are people
Yeah,
whose license falls due every month. And each month, I mean, the bigger the numbers get, the harder it gets to prosecute. So the less penalty there is for evading. And the more people each month will say, well, why should I be the mug? So it's going to continue getting worse. It's not going to get better, especially
yeah.
when they're, 80 grand photographers are in the news. And,
Well, if they have the money to pay those kind of wages for that kind of job, then they don't have a money problem.
yeah, but this is the other thing. I mean, the other thing about that story, and I know we're harping on about it a bit, but I think it's important to say this, is it really shows the gulf in the culture in RTE and other media organizations. Like, and I'm not defending any other media organization, but I can tell you hand on heart, if you raise that kind of issue in News Talk or Today FM and said we need a photographer, we're going to pay them this much money, you'd be
Yeah,
sacked on the spot. They don't pay some
yeah,
of their presenters that much money.
yeah.
Virgin
I
Media, I
know.
think the average salary for a presenter is, without outing anyone's wages, but like it's not in the six figures.
Oh, I
It's
don't
it's
know.
it's astonishing. Um, like and at the same time they say, oh, we're short staffed, we've no resources. And I mean, you and I both know, because I think we've both been on both on what used to be TV3 and is now Virgin Media, and on RTE. You go into a studio in Virgin Media to do a TV program, there's like the presenter, there's a floor manager, and the cameras are automated by robots, and one guy
Mm.
in a control room is running them. You go into RTE and there's like 70 guys standing on the floor managing the thing. The gulf in expenditure to produce roughly the same content is astonishing. And I don't even think they're aware of it. I really don't.
Mm. No, I don't
Uh,
think so either. Well, obviously not, because they're still. I mean, it just beggars belief that there was nobody at any point who had any kind of commercial or like kind of political, say, awareness to go, yeah, maybe let's keep that job application back for a while, just until the heat, is gone out of this
yeah.
thing. No,
Or
put
as you
it
say,
out.
make do with screenshots for a while. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
also, if it's promotional, presumably, right, they're still producing the RTE guide, aren't they? Like, presumably
Oh,
the
that's a
RTE,
good. That's
the,
a good question.
I,
I don't know.
I assume they are. I mean, I think I would have heard if it had closed down. If it did close down, then this is obviously irrelevant. But I don't think it did. But like, Fair City is going to be promoted in um like presumably the RTE guide has a photographer on staff who can go and take those pictures. And presumably RTE is the kind of organization where they can take those pictures, and like they've got photographers on staff already. They definitely do.
Well, that's a
So I
good
mean,
point. Yeah, of course they do.
it's just double jobbing everywhere you look as well. That's the other thing. So there you are. Um,
So what's
we
up for the week?
well Saturday, we were having this gathering in the
Yes,
RDS in relation to free
yes.
speech.
Hmm.
Um, with various massively influential speakers, like some guy called John McGurk speaking at it, and then Michael Schellenberger, who is listeners may know who he is, but if you don't, he's basically the guy who brought about the Twitter files story in the US. He's a journalist and free speech activist. He's going to talk about the importance of sort of free speech in society. I want to stress it's not about the hate speech bill. It's more about all of the sort of speech issues from if you're a pro-lifer, then you might be concerned about the restrictions on protest. If you're somebody who's like a fan of Enoch Burke, you might be concerned with his situation. If you're somebody who's interested in the hate speech bill, you might be interested in that situation. So Sharon Kyogan is coming. Helen Joyce is coming, from formerly of The Economist. Niall Boylan. A lot of people know Niall Boylan as an exceptional broadcaster. He's going to be there. Leisha De Bruin, who's been on this podcast from the Countess, is going to give us a speech as well. And I think we're going to have an audience of about 1,000 people in the RDS on Saturday. So that should be a good event. Although I'm looking forward to seeing the protesters, once they're finished at the Let Women Speak event, may come down to give us a bit of aggro as well. Hopefully not. Hopefully they tire themselves out shouting at Rosie Parker.
I think the most important thing is that this event is happening at all. I love the fact that people are becoming, because it's easy to forget, but like I definitely think people are becoming braver and braver and more animated and more public about talking about some of these things in the last 6 months to a year. And I think that this event is real demonstration of that. And if people come and protest it, I mean, once again, if they come and protest it, if they go from, ban all turfs or whatever nonsense they go on with about that, and then they come down to this, they're just going to draw more attention to it. So they're like, happy days,
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. I mean, look, people have asked me in the last couple of days, are there tickets left? There unfortunately aren't. It's sold out, which is great. I'm not complaining. And if you're late, sorry, tough. It's sold out. But it will be streamed live on Gript Media's Twitter/X channel. And the recording should be available afterwards. So if you can't make it in person, sit at home, put on a cup of tea, and tune in for as long as you can listen to me blabbering on. But look, you've listened to me blabbering on for an hour if you're listening to this. So obviously that might not be as torturous as I think it might be. So we'll be delighted to have you with us. Anyway, I think we'll leave it there, Sarah, for this week.
Okie dokie.
Pleasure always talking to you. I don't think we were as world weary this week. Hopefully not. We'll go back to that next week. I'm sure there'll be something to be world weary about. But until then,
sometimes I still have to say that sometimes it's not world weariness. It's just, it is. Sometimes I just feel like the best thing for me to do not to get really angry is sometimes to laugh. I have to laugh sometimes. You know?
And I also think this is just advice to anyone who's listening who maybe is feeling that we shouldn't be world weary and should be angry all the time. Anger has its place, and it can be expressed, but like you can't. I mean, we all have our own lives. There are things that are more important than this stuff. There is your family, there's your kids if you have them, there's your dog if you have one, there's your parents, there's your job, there's your colleagues. There's a whole world out there beyond politics. Politics is hugely important. That's why we talk about it every week. But you can't let, as Yoda once said, cannot let the hate flow through you all the time. Only when it's appropriate. Anyway. There we go. That was another edition, my friends, of The Week That Really Was. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we will be back next week on the 21st of September to see what's happened in the interim. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. Take care.